A Day in Colonial Haiti by Philippe Girard. Narrated by Carrie Wilson. "6 a.m. The coachman takes his boss for a ride. The sun has just begun to rise to the east, above the plain of the Cape. Toussaint, the coachman of the Breda plantation in Eau de Cap, is already up. Like many Creoles, he is an early riser. In fact, he barely sleeps at all. He doesn't drink or eat much either, though he has a weakness for cured meats and sweets, as a few of his throbbing teeth can attest. He is only 5 feet 2 inches tall, and his frail physique has earned him the nickname Frata Bâton, or skinny stick. He dresses simply. His only nod to fashion is a cotton handkerchief imported from Madras that he wears in the Creole style, wrapped around his head. Toussaint will later come to be known as Toussaint Louverture, Haiti's most famous revolutionary. He will be featured on countless stamps and banknotes, as well as statues from Benin to France. But in 1784, he is a complete nobody. In fact, he doesn't even have a last name. His contemporaries only know him by his given name, which means All Saints' Day in French, probably because he was born on November 1st. When they want to distinguish him from the many other people named Toussaint in the colony, they specify from Breda, after the sugar plantation where he was born into slavery around 1743. Toussaint's boss, Bayon de Liberta, emerges from the big house. He is not the plantation's owner, but its agent. He supervises the estate's daily operations for a hefty 10% commission on behalf of the absentee owner who lives in France. Bayon is a busy man who oversees several plantations in northern Haiti. He has even purchased one of his own in Libby Parish, but he lives on the Breda plantation of Eau de Cap because it is closest to the city of the Cape. Bayon is already fully dressed. He has asked Toussaint to get the carriage ready early today because he has some errands to run in the Cape. The ride will be a short one, but Bayon wants to make a stop on the way to town. And in a gruff voice, he tells Toussaint to make it quick. The coachman is happy to oblige. He likes to push his horses hard, recklessly even. He drives a post-chaise, a small carriage built for speed. It's so small, in fact, that the coachman must ride on one of the 2 horses in the front. A year from now, after a deadly accident caused by a speeding black coachman, an ordinance will ban galloping inside the city limits of the Cape. But for now, there's no such law, and the carriage takes off in a cloud of dust. As he exits the plantation, Toussaint slows down just enough for the gatekeeper to raise the gate. The road to his right leads to the town of Limby, where Bayon owns a sugar plantation. This is the colony's main road, which is being widened to allow carriage access all the way to the capital in Port-au-Prince. The road passes through the hamlet of Eau de Cap, which was founded by a group of 12 pirates in the colony's wild early days. The hamlet is not terribly interesting. Aside from the Breda plantation, it only features a rum distillery, some brothels, and a brick manufacturer also owned by the Breda family. Toussaint has spent almost his entire life in Eau de Cap. Every foot of the road is tied to a personal memory, some happier than others. He has watched gruesome public executions in front of the Breda pottery works. A few years back, he saw the slaves of Eau de Cap fight back and lynch the executioner. Toussaint's ex-wife and her current beau, a building contractor, live in the hamlet. There's no use dwelling on it, he thinks, moving on. Toussaint turns left toward the city of the Cape. The road is wedged between a series of hills and the river of Eau de Cap. It flooded its banks last February after an exceptionally wet winter, but the rains have since abated and the road is dry. The carriage picks up speed on the downhill slope. On such trips, Bayonne often chats with Toussaint. The agent and his coachman are close despite their unequal social status. Bayonne speaks Creole, the Afro-French pidgin that a master normally employs when speaking to his servants. Toussaint responds in formal French. He struggles to master that language's complex grammar and throaty R's. His prominent chin does not help with pronunciation, but he is an ambitious man, and Parisian French has more cachet than Haitian Creole. He even uses formal French when chatting with his new wife and children, which strikes his contemporaries as oddly pretentious for a black coachman. They can judge me all they want. I am moving up in the world. This morning, there is no lively conversation, whether in Creole or in French. Bayonne is silent, sullen even. Toussaint thinks he knows why his boss is so cross. There was some screaming in Madame's room last night. The Bayonnes had another marital spat. Toussaint's goddaughter, Marie Joseph, a mixed race girl who works in the big house, told him all about it. Toussaint is not one to judge. He also has a reputation as a philanderer, and he's currently on wife number 2. Almost. Divorce is not legal yet in France, so he is still technically married to his first wife. He prefers to stay quiet about the apparent bigamy, because Toussaint's almost new wife is expecting, and he does not want his child to be born a bastard. The agent is shifty in his own ways. To save on labor costs at his sugar plantation in Limbe, Bayonne frequently borrows slaves who belong to his employer. Meanwhile, many of the slaves he does own are fed on the Breda estate at the absentee owner's expense. How would the owner notice these shenanigans? He lives in Paris. This is the well-known risk of leaving one's plantation in the hands of a crooked agent. Toussaint is not one to rat out his boss. 10 years ago, Bayonne gave Toussaint his freedom. Well, almost. Bayonne doesn't own the Breda plantation, so the slaves are not his to free. Instead, he granted Toussaint a kind of informal freedom, known as liberté des savants in the colonial lingo. Official or not, this was the most momentous event in Toussaint's life. Since then, he has added the letters NL, which stands for Free Black in French, next to his name on legal documents. If I call myself free, maybe they will see me as free. After he was sort of released from bondage, Toussaint tried to make a living by leasing a coffee plantation in the hills above Grande Riviera, 12 miles southeast of the Cape. But the business venture failed 2 years later, and he returned hat in hand to the Breda plantation. That's when she left me for that rich prick. Bayonne was generous enough to hire Toussaint back as a coachman. He will forever be grateful for his patron's acts of kindness. Toussaint knows better than to anger the agent anyway. The coachman may be free, or at least he may claim to be, but many of his relatives are still enslaved on the plantation, including his new common-law wife. His parents are also enslaved. Well, they are almost his parents. When Toussaint's biological parents passed away 10 years ago, he adopted 2 elderly slaves as his surrogate mother and father. One is a washerwoman. The other is the gatekeeper he saw on the way out of the plantation. Toussaint's lifelong goal is to free his many family members, starting with the women, since they give birth to more slaves anytime they get pregnant. To succeed, he needs the agent on his side, even if that means making some unsavory arrangements. Doucement à l'éloigné, he reminds himself in his mixture of French and Creole. That's his motto. Slowly go far. Bayonne stirs. Before the agent can utter a word, Toussaint pulls on the reins of his horse, and the carriage makes a sharp left turn on an access road. Bayonne nods in agreement and slumps back on his seat. Toussaint smiles. He knows his boss's wishes before the man even expresses them. That is the mark of a good servant. Toussaint, on the other hand, is hard to read. Most slaves are. Overt resistance is punished harshly, so they learn to play the role of the obedient servant if they want to survive. Toussaint is particularly good at hiding his innermost thoughts. He has dozens of acquaintances, relatives, godchildren, and associates, but not a single person he can truly call a friend. Even the most basic aspects of his life, the date of his birth, the circumstances of his apparent freedom, the existence of his first wife, are a mystery to his contemporaries. Shortly after leaving the main road to the Cape, the carriage screeches to a halt in front of the Charity Hospital, located halfway between the Breda plantation and the city of the Cape. Bayonne is not sick. Even if he were, an institution rife with infectious diseases would not be his first choice. But the monks who run the hospital are famous for their bountiful tables, and the head doctor, Charles Otto, is an interesting mealtime companion. Bayonne often stops at the hospital to get breakfast on his way to the Cape. Toussaint jumps off his horse and helps his boss get down from the post chase. He occasionally serves his boss at the monk's table, but today Bayonne waves him away and tells him to wait outside. Hopefully breakfast will not take too long. Today is market day in the Cape, and the roads will soon be jammed. Toussaint wants to arrive in time to attend the Easter service. Between two errands for the boss, it would be nice to spend time at the market with Marie. But all this is up to God and Bayonne. The coachman heads for a bench shaded by a large mango tree. He has recognized several familiar faces there. One is Biassou, a slave who normally works on the charity monk sugar estate down in the plain of the Cape. Biassou came to the hospital on his day off to pay a visit to his mother, who was enslaved there. Honor, says Toussaint. Respect, responds Biassou, as per the traditional Haitian greeting. Biassou is an intriguing character. He is frank and courageous, but he can also become brusque and even violent when he has had too much to drink, which is often. Though it is not yet 7 in the morning, Toussaint gets a whiff of cheap rum when he sits down next to Biassou on the bench. The coachman pinches his lips in silent disagreement. The third man on the bench is Jeannot, the slave of a relative of Mr. Bayonne. He dabbles in voodoo and has a nasty temper. Toussaint ignores him. The last man on the bench is named Jean-Francois. He is a coachman like Toussaint, though much younger at the age of 19. As soon as Toussaint arrives, Jean-Francois breathlessly informs him that he has something to confess. He is in love. He just met a young woman named Charlotte, and he is certain that she is the one. The two young lovers have even hatched a plan to abscond to the hills above the Cape and start a new life as married maroons. Toussaint smiles imperceptibly. Since when is marriage about love? That young fool must have sneaked into the theater of the Cape and watched one of those silly romantic plays that are all the rage among the whites. Jean-Francois is a dandy who likes fancy clothes and the finer things in life. Even if his love is real, he and his lady friend will not last long on the lam, wrapped in silk and satin. And yet, Toussaint can sense some steel behind his young friend's foppish facade. Jean-Francois could make a fine leader when the time comes. So could Biassou, whose ties to voodoo and sheer physical strength could help mobilize the African-born field hands. So could Janu, though he is scary. When will the time come? Slave revolts are a dime a dozen in the history of the Caribbean. Not a single one has ended well. Getting the timing right will be a matter of life and death for whoever is daring enough to raise the standard of revolt. Toussaint looks around anxiously, as if he's concerned that someone heard his rebellious thoughts. Yes, the time will come, he thinks, but until then, he must play coy. Slowly, go far. His face returns to its usual, inscrutable stare. In the meantime, Toussaint has some important business to attend. Lent is over. He looks up at the verdant foliage above him, hoping to spot a plump, juicy mango to sate his sweet tooth.
A note from the historian. In 1789, heirs to the Breda plantation sacked Bayonne for fraud. Toussaint Louverture, Georges Biassou, Jean Aubulet, and Jean-François Papillon were the four foremost leaders of the slave revolt when it broke out in 1791, along with Bouquemont Duty, who is mentioned in the 8 p.m. chapter. Jean Aubulet was executed by his own side for using excessive cruelty against white prisoners. Jean-François was more moderate because the French took his wife, Charlotte, hostage. Biassou also had to balance his leadership role and his concern for his loved ones. He even staged a raid at the charity hospital to rescue his mother from the monks who kept her enslaved there. Both Jean-François and Biassou eventually became generals in the Spanish army. They died in Cadiz, Spain, and St. Augustine, Florida, respectively. Toussaint initially acted in the shadows because he feared for his family members who were still living on the Breda plantation, but he eventually sidelined all his rivals, and a man also known as the Black Napoleon became Haiti's governor for life in 1801. This book is available on Amazon as an audiobook, a Kindle ebook, a paperback, and a hardback. To learn more about the life of Toussaint, you can also read my full-length scholarly biography entitled Toussaint Louverture, A Revolutionary Life.